Welcome to a special edition of Biztech's Ambassador Conversation Show. Today, our conversation is with the Ukrainian ambassador to Singapore, Her Excellency Kateryna Zelenko. Ambassador Zelenko, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, Ambassador, for many people around the world, the resistance that the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian people has been extraordinary. Russia was expected to steamroll past. It has not. Your people have been galvanized and they have resisted. Now, could you give us, from a starting point, what have the latest developments been on the diplomatic front in the last 24 hours?
Well, this is the 14th day of the full-fledged war Russia's against Ukraine, the war against the whole civilized world. Russian troops continue simultaneously attacking Ukraine from the territory of Russia, Belarus, and temporarily occupied parts of Ukraine, Donetsk, Luhansk, and the regions of Crimea. In fact, the regions, so there are many attempts made by the Russian Federation to reach the Blitzkrieg, which all have failed. And what we see now is the intensified shellings and attacks on the objects of places of civilian infrastructure and, of course, residential areas. What is going on in the diplomatic sphere? Of course, we are all engaged in the process of finding the peaceful settlement of the situation. Ukraine wants peace. We are not the country which has started this war. Ukrainian has in fact never invaded any other sovereign state. And of course, we want to find the peaceful solution. However, we need to be clear about our position, which means that Ukraine is definitely ready for talks, but we are not ready to surrender our territorial integrity, sovereignty, and our independence.
Now, Your Excellency, what's the military situation on the ground? Because you have received a lot of aid from various countries now. So equipment is pouring into the Ukraine. You've also have as many as 20,000 foreign nationals who have volunteered to fight as part of the civilian militia. Could you tell me a little bit more about the resistance against the Russian invasion?
Yes, of course. We all have seen that the Russian leadership has underestimated the dimension of the resilience within the Ukrainian society. And the fact that Russian troops did not achieve success on the ground could be only possible thanks to the resilience and the strength of Ukrainian army. Of course, a huge support and unbelievable efforts made by our population in the regions. Many Ukrainians have already joined the so-called territorial defense forces, volunteering, trying to support Ukrainian army, cooking warm food, providing medical aid, supporting children and elderly. So there is a huge variety of activities which are taking place on a daily basis. Faced with a military defeats on the ground, the Russian troops began indiscriminate attacks on Ukrainian cities with missile strikes and heavy artillery. This prevents the safe exit of humanitarian convoys carrying Ukrainian and foreign citizens, as well as the delivery of medications and food. And this is one of the biggest challenges now. We really need to see that and to face the fact that we have already lost hundreds of civilians, including children. More than 50 children died as a result of the shellings and explosions and aircraft attacks, as well as a result of Russia's violating the ceasefire regime needed for evacuation through humanitarian corridors. In the meantime, Russian troops are also suffering heavy losses. They constitute more than 11,000 personnel, more than 50 aircrafts, 80 helicopters, and we see that Russian leadership naturally attempts to conceal real losses of the Russian troops in Ukraine. We all see the activities in Russia aimed at blocking social networks, intimidating media, censorship, and imprisoning. Still, truth cannot be hidden. We see that the Russian side has already recognized these losses, but of course, there is still a long way to go, and we very much count on the support of our partners and friends across the globe.
Now, Ambassador Zelenko, I want to zoom in on the humanitarian crisis that is facing your people right now. The UN refugee chief, as of today, has said the number of people fleeing Russia's offensive has now reached 2 million. Now, which is mostly women, children, and the elderly, and they fled to obviously your neighbors, Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, and Moldova. Give us your perspective and what sort of help that you've received from the international community so far.
Yes, the humanitarian situation is rapidly deteriorating. Unfortunately, we are facing the fact that, as you correctly mentioned, around 2 million people were forced to leave Ukraine. What we see now is, of course, need for more humanitarian support, humanitarian aid provided by the international organizations. There is no question that due to the tense security situation on the ground, it is, of course, hard to provide such support, to arrange humanitarian corridors. That's what we've been facing over the last 3 days. As after the humanitarian corridors were arranged, Russian forces started shellings, and we unfortunately even have tragic cases when whole families were killed by the Russian artillery while trying to pass these humanitarian corridors. So this is a huge violation of the humanitarian law and acts of war. And we, of course, are doing our best in order to provide support to Ukrainians and foreign citizens trying to leave the country.
Now, Ambassador, speaking of foreign citizens, we have received reports from UNHCR officials that border guards are turning away foreigners in the borders, including Africans and Arabs that have been studying in the Ukraine, and only allowing Ukrainians to leave. Are you aware of this, and what is your government doing about this?
In fact, Ukraine has always been a key destination for foreign students from all corners of the globe for decades. Hence, the Ukrainian government takes very seriously all accounts alleging unequal treatment, including when it comes to crossing the state border by foreign citizens. We continue to prioritize supporting foreign citizens to leave Ukraine as safely and as quickly as possible. Over the past week, the government of Ukraine has assisted more than 130,000 foreigners to leave the country, including 10,000 Indian, 2,500 Chinese, 1,700 Turkmen, and 200 Uzbek students. Russian armed forces continue to shell Ukrainian cities in violation of the ceasefire agreement. And this, of course, has a direct negative impact on our ability to secure the safety of the foreign citizens. Despite extremely difficult conditions, the Ukrainian government has continued to keep all checkpoints on the western border open 24 hours a day. Checks and check-in operations have been simplified as much as possible, and the list of necessary documents has been minimized. It is also crucial to verify and check all the information with reliable sources about the facts or incidents while crossing the border. In fact, those who are crossing are asked to have documents ready and to be as organized as possible. But of course, the utmost priority is given to the women and children. And now what we see that at the border during this extremely challenging time, thousands of women with children were able to cross the border. But again, this is a situation where we need to be vigilant and check all the facts, because it is crucial to understand that we are not only dealing with the military aggression, but also with the massive disinformation and fake news campaigns launched by Russia.
Absolutely. Now, Ambassador Zelenko, you are ambassador to Singapore. May I ask, how has the Singapore government, as well as ASEAN from a broader perspective, supported Ukraine so far?
First of all, let me say that we really appreciate the strong response and unwavering support provided by the government of the Republic of Singapore. Singapore imposed a number of restrictions in reaction to this unprecedented act of violation of the international law, and of course, the rules-based order that happens in the 21st century in the very heart of Europe. These sanctions include export controls with the aim to weaken Russian technological capabilities. And the financial part of it, financial restrictions imposed on the Russian Federation include measures which target designated Russian banks and entities and fundraising activities benefiting the Russian government. And in addition to this, digital payment token service providers will be specifically prohibited from facilitating the transactions which could be aimed at circumvention of the financial measures. These are the steps which clearly show that Singapore completely understands that in the world where the might is right, no nation can feel safe. And this is absolutely vital to move forward on this path with providing further restrictions. This is our call on all the nations and all like-minded countries and states to move forward in order to put more pressure on the Russian Federation in order to avoid further deaths, injuries, and destructions.
Now, Ambassador Zelenko, I want to now ask you about your president, because President Zelensky has been admired for galvanizing Ukrainians to fight against Russia, and also, of course, helping Ukraine win the social media and the media war. Tell us about your president and the leadership that he's provided.
In fact, Ukrainian president is an inspiring leader. That's what we call leadership. Ukrainians see his resolve to stand up to Russian invaders and to protect the country and its people. People trust in their leadership, in their army, and our president became, in fact, a wartime leader whose country ravaged by the absolutely barbaric act of Russian aggression. However, he didn't hide in a bunker or didn't leave his country. His phrase, "I don't need a ride, I need ammunition," reflects the overall sentiment among Ukrainian population, who is ready to fight for their country to the last breath. And this is felt by a lot of people around the world. You can see ordinary people supporting Ukraine. You can see politicians taking decisions that seemed unrealistic, unimaginable a couple of weeks ago. There's no denying the fact that President Zelensky inspires Ukrainians, and Ukrainians inspire the whole world.
So, the Russian invasion, by all accounts, is not going according to plan. But Putin has a couple of demands. He has demanded 4 things. The first 2 being that Ukraine cease military action and as part of obviously a wider ceasefire. Secondly, to change its constitution to enshrine neutrality. So basically, essentially meaning staying out of NATO. Third is demanding that Ukraine and the West acknowledge Crimea as a Russian territory. And of course, fourth, to recognize the separatist republics of Donetsk and Luhansk as independent states. What's your government's position on these demands?
As I already mentioned, Ukraine is ready for negotiations. And of course, we all know that every war ends up with negotiations and with the process of talks. We are definitely ready to speak with the Russian leadership about the ways how to reach the peace and stop the bloodshed in Ukraine. But we are definitely not prepared for concessions made towards the territorial integrity and sovereignty of our country. There is one simple thing which we need to be clear about. If Russia stops fighting, there will be no war. If Ukraine stops fighting, there will be no Ukraine. This is a matter of survival for our country. This is a matter of securing our future and the future of our children and the new generations to come. But this is also the fact that Ukraine is now defending not only its territory, its sovereignty, and its independence. We are defending all the values and principles of the whole civilized community. And we fully realize that Putin will never stop until he is stopped. That is why international support, providing Ukraine with defensive weapons, financial assistance, securing our sky, which is now a very problematic part of our defense, as we see that the attacks from Russian aircrafts have intensified. So this is everything which needs to be tackled, and this is something we are working at. Of course, the country which is fighting for its independence and is showing to the whole world that we are so committed to protecting our homes, our families, deserves support, because there's no denying the fact that everyone would like to support the country which is committed to supporting and protecting itself. So this is as simple as it is, and this is the reality we are facing now.
Now, Ambassador, the challenge is the following. Russia is now in a corner. From a global perspective, it is being diplomatically and economically isolated and squeezed. But a cornered animal is a very dangerous animal. What's the end game here?
Well, the end game will very much depend on the further steps and further efforts by the international community to support Ukraine. It will very much depend on the readiness and commitment to the rules-based order. And that is why we always say that naturally, ending the war launched by Russia remains Ukraine's key priority. We never wanted this war, but we have to defend ourselves to save our people's lives and our state. And the question is, of course, if we can still enjoy the massive support and the support can be increased by the countries across the globe. We see that the front of supporters of Ukraine is growing day by day. We all have seen the resounding success by the global community in supporting the resolution of the United Nations General Assembly, where 141 nations voted for this resolution, which in fact recognized Russia as a global pariah. And this is just important to keep holding our ground and to protect our values and our principles. This is a matter of future.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for taking your time to speak to us and enlighten us on all the issues and the latest developments with your country. But before we leave, what final message would you like to leave our audience with?
Ukraine is a country which has already showcased an unprecedented level of resilience and commitment to protecting the future, the territory, the sovereignty, and the independence. We are protecting and defending our choice, which we made many years ago and which we've been fighting for. Ukraine has been at war since 2014, as Russia occupied part of its territory in Crimea and instigated the war in the eastern part of Ukraine. And of course, we know which this formidable enemy is capable of. Hence, we need support, and we need just understanding that there is a very strong solidarity with our country across the globe that will help us keep fighting, keep holding our ground, and protecting the future of the whole civilized world based on the rules-based order.
Ambassador Zelenko, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and I've been speaking to Her Excellency Kateryna Zelenko, Ambassador of Ukraine to Singapore, on Biztech's Ambassador Conversation Show. This video and podcast will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our social media platforms. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thanks for tuning in.